I don't want to be groomed to be a politician. You mean to tell me we can't build housing for homeless people with $3.2 billion? You know that expression, never let them see you sweat?
Yes.
I was seeing sweat.
I know some parents didn't even know how to use a laptop.
Yeah, and that's real. Let's just say there's a blackout in a certain area. The people that live in that community don't know what they should do.
Right.
Be able to refer to a community plan that tells them where they can go in their community, maybe if they need water, if they need ice.
Eric Adams commented, "There is a clear signal that Black and brown communities don't matter." He is calling on the federal and state government to take action, saying we can't wait for NYCHA. We need a new capital revenue plan. What are your thoughts about the high lead in the NYCHA apartments and Eric's comments?
It's disgusting. Don't get in front of a camera and talk about it. You all are charged with creating change for us. I don't care if you're the public advocate, controller, Brooklyn Borough president. We all need to be able to sit around the table and come up with solutions for people.
Good morning, everybody. I'm so excited to introduce to you a successful minority businesswoman. She's a Brooklyn native founder and a chair of the New York City Minority Women Business Enterprise. And now she's running for mayoral candidate of the Everyday New Yorker. Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Joycelyn Taylor. Hi, Mrs. Taylor. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning. I am well. How are you? Thanks so much for having me.
No problem. We appreciate you coming on the show. Reading into your background, one would get inspired how you were able to do step by step, level by level, your whole career. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. My life in New York has been interesting to say the least because, when you say step by step and level by level, it's so true. Because I literally, that song started from the bottom, now we're here. That really is my life. Only because I came from very humble beginnings. My parents came from very humble beginnings. My mom grew up in the South. She grew up very poor. They had the mantra like root hog or die because, they had to work hard just to be able to even eat every day, right? Because her parents, her mom passed away when she was really young and her dad wasn't around. So, that grit and that working hard to be able to make sure you're okay is something that I grew up with, that, you have to work hard for everything that you want to attain. And while I've done a lot of things throughout my life, I have worked very hard. I literally started, I went to school in New York. I grew up in Brooklyn. I've gone to public school. Out of public school, I started working. I started working for the State Division of Housing. I had to take different tests to get promotions there. And then I just kept, looking forward to the next steps. That took me all the way to owning my own business.
Very impressive. So, Mrs. Taylor, tell us, why are you running as mayor?
That's an excellent question. And it's one of the questions that people always ask me because people are curious as to why I didn't try to run for city council or something like that. And one of the things that I say that is the reason for that is that I don't want to be groomed to be a politician. Right. And I feel as though being a mayor of this city will put me in a position to create the leadership that we need to see. And the primary reason why I decided to run for mayor is because I see what's going on around the city. I live in Brooklyn and it had became normal almost to start seeing homeless people like on Nostrand Avenue. And we're seeing all of these nice shiny buildings going on. When I'm advocating for, minority and women-owned businesses or small businesses, I'm seeing businesses go out of business because of policies that have been implemented. So as I looked at all of those things, and I realized that every law, policy, and procedure that we have in the city, state, and federal government has been put in place by an ordinary person, I decided to be that ordinary person. Because who better to come up with solutions for you than someone like you that's been through certain things, that, you know, has had those experiences and knows firsthand what I would have liked to see when I was in those situations.
Yes. I want to ask a couple of questions. Speaking of homeless, I know me because I stay in the city. I stay in Queens and I have to go to Brooklyn for work. And when I had to do the commute, I would notice a lot of homeless people on the trains when COVID-19 first got noticed and a lot of people started getting sick. So my first question is pertaining to COVID-19. Obviously, COVID-19 and how to best stay safe is a top issue for New Yorkers. If you're elected sitting mayor, what policy would you institute, if any, different from Mayor Bill de Blasio for small businesses? As well as what would be your advice or what would you implement for the homeless, since it seems like it's getting worse and worse?
Yeah, you know, for the small business community, as I mentioned previously, I am an advocate for the small business community. And prior to the pandemic, a lot of small businesses were struggling.
Right.
And especially if you're a small business that's trying to do business with the city of New York. And the city of New York should be a client for people. It should be a good client for people, right? Because we're all investing in the city. We have to ensure the diversity of those dollars invested match how those dollars are spent. But prior to, like I said, prior to the pandemic, small businesses were already struggling. But I believe that part of the way to bring the businesses back is to intentionally create opportunities for small businesses. If we want to see them be successful, we have to be intentional in our actions in creating those opportunities. And from the conversations that I've had for people in the small business community and being a small business owner myself, I can tell you firsthand that one of the things that the city needs to do is that they need to implement a graduated deposit program for small businesses and nonprofits who are doing work with the city. The city shouldn't run off of the credit and finances of small business owners. They should not have the financial burden of trying to finance the city's work and wait to get paid. That in itself, to me, is discriminatory, and it's saying that you only want to do business with people who have money, and it also doesn't give the small business owners opportunities. So two of the things that I want to do at the beginning is implement a graduated deposit program and then actually create opportunities for small businesses. See how we can reimagine the things that they do. Like, how can we look at some of these restaurants and see if there's opportunity for them to provide lunches for schools that are in their area, right?
Right.
You know, how can we look at, the psychiatrists? We've done that with the mental health to provide services because people are going through a lot of challenges right now.
I think that's very important. Yes. A lot of people need therapists.
Yes, that's very important. Your mental health is very important. And also, how can we support them so that businesses some of who are already struggling are not put in a position to now have to borrow money again and not even know if their business is going to make it or not. That shouldn't be the answer. Okay. And it relates to homelessness. We have to be honest about the fact that homelessness has become big business. We spend $3.2 billion a year on homeless services. You mean to tell me we can't build housing for homeless people with $3.2 billion?
Exactly.
You know, one of my plans is to take money from projects that might be nice to have, but are not necessarily needs, and invest that money in building true housing, permanent housing for people who are homeless, and include the resources that they need to be successful. If we took $2 billion from other projects, let's say the $11 billion we're going to spend on jails, and we utilize that money to build housing, we could house in a year 8,000 to 10,000 people, which means that there would be 8,000 to 10,000 people less homeless in this city. Which means that if we're going by how much we spend per person, which is $53,000, we could save $530 million. And if we continue, eventually we will eradicate homelessness. Those are the kind of ideas we need to put in place. But right now, it's not about really addressing homelessness to me. It's about ensuring that the people who are making money, providing homeless services, continue to stay in business.
Okay. If the government gets a COVID-19 vaccine, it will most likely be under a Taylor administration that a vaccine will be distributed. What's your thoughts on how a Taylor administration can be best effective on vaccine distributing for the biggest city in the country?
Well, one of the first things that we have to ensure is that the vaccine is free and that it's accessible for the people who are most vulnerable, that it's available to them. We have to look at who is most at risk, and we need to make sure that we protect those individuals first. So that would be my plan of action as it relates to the distribution of the vaccine. Also keeping in mind that, everything that we do, we try to make it one size fits all, but it's not.
Right.
Be mindful of the fact that there are going to be some people who will not want to take the vaccine, that won't be comfortable with it. So given that, we need to be able to also ensure that, we have a plan of action and we communicate what we're going to need them to do if they're not willing to take the vaccine. Be that, continue to wear masks, be that, whatever it is that we might need them to do. I think the biggest issue that we've had with COVID-19, especially on, the federal level, has been a lack of effective communication.
Right.
So one of the things that I want to really be, big on is communication. Because I think when you communicate with people and you're able to see that your goals are aligned, you get better results.
What would you have done differently from Mayor de Blasio on COVID, the whole COVID situation?
I think that because it's a pandemic and this is something that never happened before, I have to be honest. When I first saw Mayor de Blasio, he was making me nervous. It seemed like he didn't really know what was going on. You know that expression, never let them see you sweat?
Yes.
I was seeing sweat. But I think that one of the things I would have done would have been effective communication. Because, and here's the thing about it, the difference with my administration is going to be, and this is something that I've said previously that I don't understand why we don't have. I would love for us to have continuity plans throughout this city when it comes to how we deal with certain situations. And those plans, and I know we have it for the fire department, we have it for the police departments, but we need it for citizens. Because when I look at this situation and I look at this moment, we asked all of the city school teachers, all of the students, and all of the parents to jump to remote learning, and no one had ever known what that was before.
Right. I know some parents didn't even know how to use a laptop.
Yeah, and that's real. So if I was mayor, and when I am mayor, I want to develop continuity plans, and we can work with the community boards, and we could do it by community. Even when there's certain situations, let's just say there's a blackout in a certain area. The people that live in that community don't know what they should do.
Right.
Be able to refer to a community plan that tells them where they can go in their community. Maybe if they need water, if they need ice, if they need a cooling center. That should already be put in place. So that's one of the major things that I will do different in my administration, because I think it's imperative that we are prepared. When you're prepared, you're able to control the results in a different manner.
Right. I know we were talking about COVID and the schooling. So hopping kind of back onto the school topic, what's your thoughts on the NYC school budget and where can we improve?
Well, we definitely need to invest more in education. And we have to invest in education in a way that's equitable. You know, when we talk about housing, right? When we do the affordable housing and we look at the median income that we're going to assess on whether you're qualified for the apartment, we can be in East New York and you look at the median income in Manhattan, Westchester, other places, right? But when it comes to education and how much money we're going to invest in East New York schools in East New York, we look at the property taxes of just East New York. And we can't have it both ways. How we invest in education, if we want everyone to be able to have the same results, there has to be equity across the board. One school in, East New York should not be lacking the same things that a school in the Upper East Side has.
Exactly.
I think we all agree that we want our children to be educated. We all agree that, success is not mutually exclusive, and they're being educated and having the tools that they need helps all of us. So we have to create that. So one of the things that I will do with in the budget and how I'll function as it relates to the budget is that there's going to be equity across the board. In 2020, we're in 2020 now. And, at the end of the day, every child should have a piece of technology, be it an iPad, a Chromebook, a laptop. This is just the way that kids operate in these days, period. Right? Everybody has technology. So the budget needs to include that. When you're in the first grade, you're going to get a piece of technology. When you go to, middle school, you're going to get another piece of technology. When you go to high school, you will receive another piece of technology. If we want kids to be successful, we have to give them the tools that they need to create success. We also have to realize that if we're willing to spend $337,000 to house an inmate in Rikers for 1 year, our kids in school should want for nothing.
Then my next question is, where will we get the money from when it comes to the school budget, and where do you think it needs to be adjusted?
It's always interesting to me when it comes down to things that we want to do for everyday people, where we have this question about where we're going to get the money from. When we spent billions of dollars in Hudson Yards, no one ever asked where we're getting the money from. My goal is to have a budget that is ideally focused on people first. Everything we do with the budget needs to be able to impact people's lives in a positive way. There are those things that you need to have and those things that are nice to have. And the funds for the needs to have is going to come from the nice to haves. Right? So listen, we have right now, there's $11 billion that's being set aside to build new prisons. We're going to pull the money from there and we're going to use it on education because we're going to be proactive about the result that we want to see. We want to see children that are purposeful, that have hope, that feel like they matter, that have goals set for themselves. We have to invest in them. So we're going to look at the budget in a way that will be a lot different from how we've examined it in the past. And we are going to focus on people first.
All right. Some schools have reopened with teachers and students physically in attendance. Do you think it's the right thing to do? And then my second question is, let's talk a little bit more about that, because we know if the positivity rate is about 3%, the school has to shut down. So in your opinion, do you think it was good to even open back up? And if so, do you think that we're going about it the most safe way? Or is there another way we can do this since COVID's still getting people sick?
Yeah, we don't have the COVID situation under control. And as of right now, we're seeing what we all knew we were going to see, and that's a spike in numbers and more cases of COVID coming out. And to me, my perspective is that it doesn't make sense to do something fast. We should try to do it as right as possible. So from my perspective, we shouldn't have rushed that period, because we never took a moment to go back to the teachers, to the students and parents, and teach them even how to do remote learning.
Now, speaking of the schools, I was watching a documentary on Vice, and I just wanted to go over a little bit of what I learned, which I'm sure you already know this, but I wanted our audience to know about it, and it was very interesting to me. New York City schools in some areas are still segregated to this day. Mayor de Blasio decided to do something about this by making New York City high schools more diverse. New York City's District 3 includes both white and wealthier parts of the Upper West Side, including the Black, brown, and poor sections of Harlem. There are 16 in a district, and the top performing schools are dominated by white and Asians. How can we help train students who are Black, poor, or brown students to be in that category as well? Because I don't think that it's just white people who are smart or just Asians that are smart. There's something that is burning the bridge, if you will, as to why is it that there's a higher rate of white students who are in these high elite schools. So what can we do so that it could be more diverse, so we can have people who look like us who are in these schools, that they have the education that they can go to Harvard or go to Spelman and just get the equal opportunities?
Yeah, and I think that comes with equity and investment, because, we're seeing a return on our investment, where when we're investing less in schools in poorer areas, don't think that those students are going to end up in better schools. If we want them to end up in better schools, we have to invest in them in every school that's here. And from my perspective, there should not be any disparity as it relates to schools. Every school, children should be getting the highest and best education possible. Every school, they should have resources, access to the resources that they need to be successful. And some of these other schools, the challenge is that they have resources. Their parents have, access to extra capital so that they can get them, tutors and other things to help them with test prep. And even if we want to be diverse in that, if these other students don't have access to that, and if these other students don't make certain grades, they'll never get into these schools that have those requirements. But we have to invest in schools so that this way there's no disparity as it relates to whether you go to school in Brooklyn and Brownsville, or if you go to school in the Upper East Side. You're getting the same level of education. And I think for some of us in the minority community, we also need resources for the parents. Because a lot of the parents are struggling because they have to work 12 and 14-hour days. So whereas other parents have the opportunity to come home and sit and, do homework with their kids and help them out and expose them to certain things, a lot of parents, I myself was a single parent. I was working 12-hour days. It took a village to help me, with my son and my nieces and nephews. Because at the end of the day, by the time you get up in the morning, you're rushing, you get the kids ready, you send them to school, you go to work, work 12 hours, you come back, did you do your homework already? If we want these kids to be successful, we have to look at everything that's involved that is a deterrent from us seeing that success. So resources for the children and resources for the parents are necessary.
And that hits home for me because growing up, my mom, like you, she worked a lot of hours. And we had this after school program in the city that I was raised in called GIAC. So we would go there and they had an hour that each child had to spend doing homework. And we would just stay there until the parents would come and get, their children. So that helped a lot. So I can relate to you when you say it takes a village, because it really does. Everybody can use help.
We do, we're not our best selves by ourselves. We're our best selves when we work together as a collective and we help each other. And I think that's the thing that we all have to start remembering and that's the way we all have to start operating in this city if we want to see change and we want to be successful.
I agree. I was watching one of your previous interviews, and I thought it was real humbling to know that you mentioned you lived in NYCHA in the past. You knew a couple people there as well. What would be the first line of defense to give residents who want to have the ability to own their homes an opportunity to do so?
Well, I think it's definitely a possibility because, we've already had a model for that in Rochdale. That used to be a housing project and they converted it to co-ops. And I think if we want to do that, and that is my goal to do that, it's more than doable. When I think about pink houses where I grew up at, there are 1,500 apartments in pink houses. If we took a third of those apartments, and keep in mind, one of the things I want people to remember is this: when we look at NYCHA and see how dilapidated it is, the city has to take full accountability for that. Because whether you are a working person that lives in NYCHA, and my dad drove a bus and we lived in NYCHA, there's a lot of civil servants that live in NYCHA. If you're a working person or you're on Section 8, it doesn't matter. The city is still getting money to maintain those developments. What are they doing with the money? That's another different question. But going back to your original question, if we took just 1,500 residents in pink houses, and let's say if we took a third of those apartments and we sold them to the residents between $100,000 and $250,000, we can raise $92 million. We can take a portion of that money and we can use it for all of the infrastructure work that needs to be done. New elevators, windows, landscaping, new security, new front entry doors. When I go back to pink houses, it's like stepping back in time. The city has never invested. The same tiles that were there when I was growing up are still there years later, 50-something years later. And then we would have money to actually provide grants to those tenants to be able to fix up their apartments individually. So they could deal with the lead abatement in their apartment. They could deal with the mold in their apartment. They can put in new flooring, get new kitchens, new bathrooms. That's the model that I want to go with. And I think it's more than possible because you have to remember, these tenants are working tenants. They're making decent incomes. In a lot of instances, some of them are already paying well over $1,000 already in rent. So that's part of the model that I want to go to create that path to ownership, because I need people to understand that you don't build legacy and you don't build stability or change your environment or change your family structure without ownership in something.
Mrs. Taylor, I just want to catch up the audience with something that recently happened in the news pertaining to NYCHA. Now, residents in NYCHA homes have complained about their concerns pertaining to lead being in their apartments. One resident, Joella Wheeler, says she discovered her son, Camille Green, had elevated blood lead levels back in 2012. His level was at 11 micrograms, well above 5 micrograms, which is already considered an elevated level of lead. Her apartment is one of many NYCHA units that contain high levels of lead. Eric Adams commented, "There is a clear signal that Black and brown communities don't matter." These are real people living in real apartments where we become the biggest slumlord in history, that New York City night attendants are treated worse than any slumlord in the city. He is calling on the federal and state government to take action, saying we can't wait for NYCHA. We need a new capital revenue plan to bring in dollars, and we need Congress, the White House, and state government to not abandon NYCHA. Now, Mrs. Taylor, what are your thoughts about the high lead in the NYCHA apartments and Eric's comments?
I think that the high lead in the apartments, and we're still talking about this, you said 2012, and we're still talking about this 8 years later. It's disgusting.
Yes.
And we have housing all over this city. When people in the city want to do right by residents, they do right. You don't hear about, an overall issue in everything that the city owns, throughout this city. But for some reason, our elected officials have become very comfortable with ignoring 600 to 700,000 residents in this city. And I know many of the politicians come out and they talk about, how, disheartened they are about the situation. But the reality of the situation to me is this, is that don't get in front of a camera and talk about it. You all are charged with creating change for us. You all are charged with being leaders in this city. One of the things that I say about when I'm mayor, I don't care if you're the public advocate, controller, Brooklyn Borough president, we all need to be able to sit around the table and come up with solutions for people. We can't point fingers at each other trying to point the blame and then nothing is happening. From 2012 to now, every politician that comes out and says something about an issue with NYCHA has been in some kind of office since 2012. So when you come out and you seem as though you're up in arms, it seems very disingenuous to me. People don't need to hear the same conversations over and over again. They need results. And that's why I always want to speak to the NYCHA residents themselves and tell them to take their power back in a positive way. Stop electing the same people and expecting different results. We don't need that in politics. People talk about politics being a game, but at the beginning of this pandemic, the one thing I appreciated was the fact that I had time to spend more time with my family, and we played a lot of games. One of the games we played was Monopoly. And when we played the game, we changed the rules. We had cash, real money in the game. We had joint ventures. We had all kinds of things. But see, that's Monopoly. The game that these politicians are playing impacts real people's lives.
I agree. I had a conversation about that not too long ago. It shouldn't even be a game. It's crazy.
Yeah. So we have to understand that, as everyday citizens, it's time for us to stop being impressed with people coming out, overstating the obvious. All you have to do is listen to Channel 11 News. Monica Morales has been talking about this for forever and a day. She's been a huge champion for NYCHA residents. So when our politicians who are put in positions of leadership come out and say the same things that we already know without any solutions, without any guarantees, it's like, it's meaningless. People need solutions. They're tired of talking about it.
All right. Now, according to CNBC, over 13,000 empty apartments, the largest decline in history. It is still expensive in Manhattan, with apartments averaging about $3,500 for one bedroom a month. Mrs. Taylor, why not just lower the price of the apartments? Wouldn't that help the business owners reel in more tenants?
One would think, they have that expression, a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush, right? Something is better than nothing. And, that's the other thing, even with the situation as relates to homelessness. We have a lot of commercial tenants and businesses that are going to have their employees work from home. You know, while this pandemic has been a terrible thing, and you know, the lives that has been lost and the businesses that have been lost, we have to look at opportunities to create some kind of wins out of this situation. So we should be looking at commercial space, we should be looking at rental space, and maybe this is the universe's way of leveling the playing field. Because the reality of the situation is that we've built a ton of luxury apartments, you know, in this city, as though we have people making $152,000 a year. $15 an hour. We're still trying to get to $15 an hour, and we have $2,000 rents. It doesn't go.
Some of those residents, they said they're not coming back to New York.
Because now it changes the game. We have to be honest about that. It changes the game. Because I can literally live anywhere and work from home.
True.
And the business owners are looking at it that it's less of an expense for them. So at some point, we have to come together and figure out what makes sense. And to me, this is an ideal opportunity to do so many amazing things. And I have so many visions as it relates to housing, because now we can take some of this housing and we can take these artists and creatives who haven't had space to be able to create and do what the things that they want to. And we can build housing for them, or give them housing where they can have recording studios and rehearsal spaces in there. And, you know, access to commercial space if they want to do, you know, have a show or something. This is a great time. We created all of this, but this is a great time for us to create and envision something that can be just so much more, and it can be greater, and people can be happy.
Understandable. Another thing that's been highlighted in the media is the Black Lives Matter movement. There's still been a lot of victims being murdered by police. In New York City, Eric Garner, his killer had 7 prior complaints. Is there a policy that can be put into place to hold cops accountable or possibly terminated for disrespecting or harassment of abusing the badge, Mrs. Taylor?
We definitely need that policy, because listen, you can't go on any other job and underperform and keep your job. It just doesn't happen. You work at McDonald's and burn the fries every time and see what happens, right? They're going to let you go. So we can't give the power of life and death to people and not have any level of accountability.
Exactly.
You know, and we have to hold police accountable, but we also have to be proactive about changing the circumstances under which people have to interact with police.
In your previous interview, you mentioned officers have only 3 months in training, and you believe there should be an increase in police training, and I agree as well. Could you elaborate on what you would like to do to improve interactions between civilians and law enforcement?
Well, one of the things that I want to do is to bring back community of policing. I remember when I was growing up in pink houses, we knew the officers. The officers knew my parents, and we weren't afraid of the officers. We had relationships. We actually felt like they were there to protect us. So I think that effective communication and bringing back community policing is important. And, you know, to me, it's very important that the officers have training in critical thinking and de-escalation, and being able to investigate a situation to determine how they need to handle it. Listen, recently I went back to pink houses to do a cleanup day. And I spoke with the development. I spoke with, you know, community affairs. One of the officers came out there early on, and while we're there during the day, 2 officers approached us and immediately said that, who gave us permission to be here? that they weren't aware that we were going to be here, and they're not, we're not allowed to be here. And my first thought was that these residents, while I don't live here anymore, these residents certainly still do live here. And under what authority do you say that they don't have to be the ability to be in a park where they live?
Right.
And bring that up as an example to say that the way the whole situation was handled was just a reaffirmation to me that we need to be able to train officers to know how to know and to understand that their role is to de-escalate every situation, not to make things worse. Because here I am, I'm a civilian, but I'm a Black woman who grew up in NYC that's running for mayor. And when they saw me, all they saw was another Black woman. It didn't matter. So we have a lot of training to do as it relates to how we want to interact with each other. And we have to go into everything with the understanding of what do we want the end result to be? Because everything that we do needs to work towards creating that end result.
All right, Mrs. Taylor. Well, I just want to say thank you. It's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. And I want to thank you for taking the time to come on the show, because I know your schedule is very busy since you are running for mayor and you have your own personal business that you have to tend to. So thank you. And let the audience know, where can they find you, and what could we do to help push you to have that seat in office?
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me, because I truly appreciate it. It's platforms like yours that give me the opportunity to come out and speak, that are really, truly helpful to my campaign. And I just want to ask everyone that is watching, if they could support the campaign. One of the things that you can do to support the campaign is to go to my social media at Taylor42021 on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and like and follow and encourage your friends and family to do so as well. I always say, tell a friend to tell a friend to tell a friend. And this is a truly grassroots effort. So I want people to understand that in order for me to get on the ballot, there are certain thresholds that I have to meet. I have to raise $250,000. None of that money goes to the candidate. All of that money goes towards supporting the campaign. It has to be a minimum of $10 donations. So if they can donate $10 at Taylor42021.com, that would be extremely helpful. And also volunteer for the campaign. We need people that may not have political experience, but have life experience. And with the understanding that when those who are most in need are okay, we're all okay.
Okay. And when is the deadline to donate? And also, when is the election?
The deadline, well, you can continue to donate until, the point where I am, on the ballot. Hopefully that's the goal. This is a grassroots effort. But the deadline to raise the $250,000 is actually December 31st. So people have to understand, while the election seems like it's far away, there are so many steps that happen ahead of time when you're running for office, and that's why people start their campaigns early. So the deadline for raising the $250,000 is December 31st. Then in February, as the next step, if we reach that goal, we'll start going out and canvassing for petitions. That's a 38-day period. And then the election is in June. The primary has been moved up to June, which makes it a lot more challenging for grassroots candidates. But I know with the support of the people that we are going to be successful in this campaign.
I love that. Yes, speak it into existence. That's positivity.
Yes, we need it. Listen, we need it. We're all tired of fighting. We need some good people to all get together and sit down around the table and create the greatness that I know we're capable of.
That's right, Mrs. Taylor. Thank you again. And we look forward to speaking to you